All right, so this week in your EDUC 1300 class, you guys have been talking about the different types of thinking that you'll find in college. So for this particular one, I'm going to cover critical thinking and how we can kind of walk through and how we can help answer the questions that we might see on exams or essays or any kind of homework and how to approach these kinds of questions because they're a little different than they were in high school. So let's start with like what is critical thinking? So critical thinking is really just applying what you know. It's not simply memorizing things, it's applying it and really explaining your answer. It's looking at all the different parts of it. Is something missing? What do you need to add? It's expanding your answers, putting all the pieces together, what you know, to solve some sort of problem or answer some sort of question. Some students, when they're coming from high school to college, myself included, get a little tripped up with that, right? Because like in high school, it's a lot of memorization in for your questions and your exams, right? Sometimes you have some, expand or describe, but it's very like memorizing. You can find all the answers in your textbook. College is a little different. There is some memorization and just kind of straight answers and definitions, but it's also a lot of like expanding kind of what you know and really just applying it. So, for example, like in your biology classes, you may notice it's not just simply telling me about, muscle contraction, but it's also maybe, well, what happens when something goes wrong in muscle contraction and what are the effects of that? Right? So you have to really understand it and kind of go, okay, well, if this doesn't work, then all of these things will happen. Right? In your history classes or your government classes, it's like, well, why did these things happen and what were the different things that effects that went into, you know, that caused World War One or whatever you guys are discussing. It's not simply like, well, this is why it started. So we're gonna walk through a little activity that I have to kind of how to approach some of these questions and the different parts and to walk through them. So for this activity, we're gonna pretend that we have this question that we got. So, which of the following characters is the best villain? So, Darth Maul, Ramsay Bolton, Thanos, or Michael Myers? Explain. So, for those that don't know, this here is Ramsay Bolton. He's from Game of Thrones. This here is Michael Myers from Halloween. This is Darth Maul from Star Wars, and then this is Thanos here from the Avengers movies. So, we have this question, and we're going to go ahead and step by step kind of go through how to answer this question so we get full credit. So first is going to state our opinion or our stance. It can also be a definition depending on your question. So our question was, who is the best villain? So I'm going to say Ramsay Bolton is the best villain out of those four. Now, right, the thing to remember is that, a villain and what makes the best villain is a little, like, what does that mean? So I'm going to define what that is. So the best villain to me is the most terrifying, but it's also a very smart villain. So in your high school classes is probably where you ended with a lot of like, all right, I said my opinion, here we go, moving on. But in college, we're using critical thinking, so we need to explain our answers and explain why we think our answer is correct. So we're gonna go into like why Ramsay is the best villain, what makes more of a best villain, and why we think we're right and the other options were wrong. So our next step is gonna be to explain, kind of expand it. So we need to make sure we're backing up your claim. That's all critical thinking is just using your facts, your evidence. These are your little details in your textbook, and all those on your notes, and putting it all together. An important thing here to remember is your facts versus your opinions. So facts are based on evidence, and opinions are just opinions. Because I said so is not going to get you points on your essay or your exam or your test. So in our example, we already said that Ramsay Bolton is, I think, the best villain, and I think the best villain is smart and cruel. So, what makes Ramsay smart and cruel? So, Ramsay is smart, and he thinks his plans through, right? He thinks everything through. He's brutal and tortures everyone else. He enjoys causing pain, and he likes to toy with others psychologically. There's the physical torture, but there's also the psychological element of it. So our next step is we're going to expand on each point. We're going to kind of explore each point and expand our reasoning as to, for example, like we said, why, Ramsay enjoys torturing people. So this can be examples, some, again, even more evidence, more facts to back it up. So You see here that these are our 4 points from our previous slide. So we're going to expand each point even further. This can be, like I said, examples, just more better explanations about things. So our first point was Ramsay is very smart and he thinks his plans through. So an example of that is how he defeated Stannis Baratheon. First, he only did it with like 20 men. He only had 20 men and kind of took him out, and his Stannis's men left him. And then later, when Stannis approached at Winterfell, he defeated him permanently, forever gone. So there's an example of that, of how Ramsay had a smaller group, but defeated the bigger group. So clearly, he's very smart. Our other point we had is Ramsay is brutal and he tortures other people. So examples of that, right? Like he skins people alive and he likes to hunt people, right? We see that with some of his enemies that he skinned them. We see that hunting people like Theon, he hunted Theon. The other thing we have, our next point was Ramsay enjoys the pain he causes. So an example of this is how he tortured Sansa, makes her feel uncomfortable, how he beat her and really just enjoyed that. And the same thing too with like Theon and Reek. Like he really enjoyed the torture and enjoyed when they were uncomfortable. Ramsay toys with others psychologically. So an example of this to expand upon is that we see it. He plays games with Theon when Theon was captured, right? Like he knew that Theon obviously was his captive, but he sat there and really kind of made Theon question his reality. So that's a way that like Ramsay toys with people psychologically. So you can see these are all examples of each point. Each sub point here is an example of this. So another thing too, if you're critically thinking, this is more for like your essays, probably than some of your other like straightforward like science things. But another important thing for people who think critically is to consider other perspectives, different points of views, different opinions if you're writing a kind of an opinion piece. And it's okay to agree to disagree. That's like put that out there. Like it's okay to like, look, I think this viewpoint is different, but I still think mine's better, and here's why. That's totally fine. The other thing to admit was when you're wrong and when you don't know something. Sorry, no. I mean, obviously, maybe wrong, but like when you don't know something. So admit like, hey, like I don't understand this, or this didn't make sense, so I'm kind of focusing on these other things instead. Because you're admitting like you have a bias there. They're admitting that like you don't have all the facts and information, and that's what good critical thinkers do. So in our example here, going back, so we had the 4. So we're going to like admit other opinions. So like for Darth Maul, here we're gonna admit like he's also very smart, like Ramsay is. So we're gonna admit and say, you know what, yeah, like there's another opinion that Darth Maul is also smart. And they're right. But as a counterpoint, we're gonna start doing counterpoints, is that he's not necessarily as cruel as Ramsay is. So another point too, we're gonna admit like Thanos has a very like he killed half the universe, right? So clearly has a higher like kill count than Ramsay does. So we're gonna acknowledge that. But we're gonna point out though too though that he isn't necessarily as smart as Ramsay, right? Like Ramsay clearly has a very well thought out plan. Also Ramsay is like pure evil. Like he enjoys the killing. Like Thanos in his mind had an idea of like a reasoning behind it, right? Now, the other part too, remember I said last slide, like admitting when you don't have all the information or saying like you don't know certain things. So in this particular example, I'm going to admit that like I haven't seen Halloween actually, so I don't know anything actually about Michael Myers. Um, so I'm going to put in here that the reason like I'm not picking him is partly because I haven't actually seen this movie, so I don't have any information to base an opinion on. So that's all it is. That's all critical thinking is. It's just walking you through, expanding your answers, bringing in evidence, backing up your points. And the point is y'all already do this, right? So you do it. If there's trailers released, people have opinions here, right? So we have the Thunderbolts trailer, and there's an Agatha All Along season thread from Reddit. This is from YouTube. This is from Reddit. You already do all this, right? Like someone drops an opinion about why the prequels are better, and you'll get like comments that are like dissertations on why it's better. Same thing with music, or halftime shows, or drawing a blank on everything right now, obviously, but like books or anything that you guys talk about like on social media, you already do the critical thinking. You already say like why you think this is better or why you disagree with that. You bring in like, well, they did this in a previous thing, or they did that, or I disagree, or look how many, albums they've sold here. Whatever it is, you already do it. You already think critically. All you need to do is apply it for class. So these are examples of some questions you might see in some of your classes, right? So explain transcription and translation might come up in biology. Describe in detail the events leading up to World War I. Explain in detail the steps of muscle contraction. What are the themes in Romeo and Juliet? What causes inflation? Why does Texas have more House reps than Maine, right? So it's not like, for example, the transcription and translation one, it's not simply saying like, hey, give me the definition of transcription and translation. It's, you could give a definition, but it's also expanding into, well, what exactly, describe the process of it. What is the importance of it? I'm a science person, so I'm going to pick on the science questions. So explaining in detail all the steps of muscle contraction, right? So that one's pretty straightforward, all the steps, and you might go like, here's why it's important, or what happens when this goes wrong, right? The themes found in Romeo and Juliet, right? Like, here's the theme. Why do I think this is a theme? Here's where we see it. Here's why I believe these are all the little evidence points that say, like, this is why the theme is. So, like I said, you already do it. Like, going back to our previous slide, like, maybe. Maybe not. Maybe not. All right. You already do it is the point. So you just need to do it for class. And as always, if you have any questions or you want to follow up or you want to work through something, just email me or discussion board, however you want to get a hold of me, that's totally fine. Just let me know and we can work something out.